So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers. Regen Ray here, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm really excited today because today's guest is someone who hangs out a lot in the garden and someone that I reached out to after seeing a Facebook post that he was helping people post floods here in Australia, and jumped in and got his hands dirty with one of our members at the time. Ian, welcome to the show and thanks for being a soil lover.
Thanks, Ray. It's nice to be here. And hello,
now
soil lovers.
Nice. And I know you're a keen listener as well, so you have been along the journey of the podcast.
Yeah, I'd actually love to say that as you introduced yourself then and the podcast, I was like, oh, wow, I'm hearing the same kind of scripted introduction and I'm seeing it in video form here now, so it's quite novel. It's like, oh, Ray's actually in my house.
A bit meta. Well, welcome to the show. And you are from you have a YouTube channel and you've got an online community and teach courses, and it's called the Gourmet Garden. Tell the soil lovers, school. Tell the soil lovers a little bit more about what you do, how you got that started and why.
So I'm a passionate foodie and I've been working with food for my adult life. I studied a degree in environmental science back in my 20s, and I took that path as a career for a couple of years. And my heart has always been in food. And so the Gourmet Garden School is my recent, about 3 years ago, I moved with my wife a bit further south. We were in the Byron Shire before, and I moved here to set up and establish the organisation. And it is my way of sharing my knowledge and passion to help other people grow better quality food, and emphasis on better quality and consequently less work. So the Gourmet Garden School is my way of helping people understand what they need to do to create the conditions for their food to naturally be of better quality. And yes, through workshops and online programs and presentations and podcasts and all sorts of casual conversations, that's what I do.
Love that. And so much so that you actually made a course about the floods and how to deal with like waterlogged soil. And you even released it, from what I remember, as a free course. So that way people could just bounce back. Why did you do that? Like, a lot of people.
Well, I've been getting into online courses in this last couple of years since starting the organisation. And the floods that came through the Northern Rivers, specifically about March last year, were particularly devastating. We were significantly affected here. We're about 3 hours south of where the worst of the flooding happened. But we're on a small rise and we're at the end of a driveway, and the water actually flooded so much that our house was just like sitting above the water line. Like literally, I think 76 centimetres was how far in elevation it got from reaching the doorstep. And so even though that would have taken a lot more water and rain to get there, what I noticed is that the urgency to do something about that was significant. We had saturated soils in the garden. It was terrible for the garden and growing conditions. And with an intimate understanding of how to manage that, and that not being a good situation at all to be in, and having to manage that, I figured that I had some useful skills to share. And with the community banding together to help so many people who've been flood affected, and not really feeling like another person throwing sandbags out from a wet house was probably going to be the most value for my skills, I decided to put together a short course and make it available for people. I actually put it together as a Zoom series initially. And that Zoom series went over 5 parts, and I had 300 people sign up, and the content was so much and rich that I actually thought this may be more accessible in a course. So I put together a short course, and that course is still available for free. And it's called Flooded to Fertile. And it's available from my website. So for anyone that wants to access that, that's available through any online browser and also through the app. I have a special app.
I love that. I think it's such a great, because most people try and capitalize, I guess, on those kind of situations where it's like, here's an opportunity, let me sell a course and, put a dollar value to it. But you just had the opposite. And I think that's what a lot of people in this community do. We really are there to help each other, and we create content, YouTube videos. We're always giving the gift of education. The same with the podcast. It's always that conversation that people can hear months and years down the track and go, that's the tip and trick that I needed to hear. And that's how I found you, is because one of our members was experiencing the water damage that was happening on their farm, and I found your content in a video and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I connected you too, and then that led on to additional work and consulting. And I just love that magic can happen in a community like this, where it's a win-win for everyone. And how are some of the stories of like people that you've met through that? And like, I love the whole flooded to fertility. It's like bouncing the soil back to its fertility, and seeing a positive that can come from such a devastating event. Have you worked with many people and seen their farms turn around since then?
I haven't worked with many people directly for that duration. I've had a lot of interaction with people. I've had many conversations and a few phone calls. A couple of people who were really struggling with contamination specifically. There was a nasty incident of a very large diesel tank floating down the main street and being deposited in the front of some suburban houses, and a massive volume, I forget the number, of litres of diesel has leaked out all over the neighbourhood. And so there's a big contamination issue. And unfortunately, the authorities don't manage that microbially. They don't manage it biologically. They manage it from a hazardous waste perspective, which is to either dig a hole and bury that contaminated soil, or to dig it up and take it somewhere else to bury it. And it's not very effective, unfortunately. So I've had a few conversations with people, but ultimately what the floods have brought to people's awareness is when their soils do not drain adequately in excessive rain events, and with the climate being a little wilder than perhaps what it used to be, we have to come to terms with the possibility that we're going to get more extreme storm events. And so devastating as that was, and a massive amount of rain as that was, it was an indicator for opportunity for improvement for everyone that suffered flood saturation, saturation of their soils. Obviously, rising floodwaters is another matter altogether, but even just the heavy rain, the combination of extremely heavy rain day after day for a few weeks, and the lack of sun and the lack of drying, the lack of oxygen-rich conditions in the water, even though temporary, was long enough that it caused all sorts of problems. And so mineral imbalances just, went off the charts. Biological issues became an issue where perhaps they weren't. But what I noticed most is that those who had an approach to caring for their soil and wanting to restore good structure as soon as possible, the moisture that was still present in the soil enabled the biological rebounding. And, biology needs moisture, and adequate moisture or abundant moisture is the perfect conditions if there's adequate oxygenation. And so I have spoken to some growers who've experienced wonderful fertility response since the floods, and partly due to residues being deposited, but also through to improved management.
Yeah, love that. And it's a change of mindset and paradigm shift, I guess. It's looking at that problem with a different lens and seeing that there is opportunities that lie there. What took you down this path of really understanding this, because you mentioned soil biology and the fact that, other companies maybe, or councils don't react to it to see that the biology can actually solve the problem, and they just kind of dig it out, which probably makes it even worse, because then you're filling that hole with other topsoil that's probably not as fertile and not local. So, and probably not even topsoil, it's just landfill. And so what led you down that path of really understanding the importance of the biology and the little critters in the soil?
Well, it's been a journey, as you can imagine. I think the biology component specifically was around 2010, 11 time. I started my own food gardening consultancy. I used to work for a ski resort as the environment officer, and I left that employment to pursue my own business, my own passion, and dealing with home gardens, dealing with particularly dry affected areas where I was in Victoria, I noticed that the hydrology was everything. Management of hydrology was everything. And it was that consistency of moisture that was necessary. And the reason that was necessary was to support the biological population. And so this took me into understanding anything that could help hydrate and regulate water in the soils. And that took me on to compost tea as a possible amendment. And I ended up doing a course in compost tea with the Soil Food Web, learning how to make their version of ideal compost and analysing the results of the tea brewed using their techniques. And that was where it just blew the world open in terms of microbiological lens for viewing the soil, where I quickly realised that it was so complex that obviously, lifetime soil scientists are still humbly acknowledging that they're very much students and we know so little. And what I realized was I'm not in my lifetime going to expect to understand the complexity of what I'm dealing with. But what I can understand is if as the custodian of the land, if the land manager, if I'm able to create the conditions that enable as diverse a biological population as possible to be thriving and active, then that's a job well done. And that's going to allow the self-organizing intelligence of the system to actually manage itself. And so I don't need to understand the complexity to the degree that I'd like to. That I'll be honest, I'd love to understand it more. And I'm okay with that it's not. And just appreciate that if I can create the conditions for the biology to really thrive, then I'm well ahead of the game.
Yeah, I love that sense of like not needing to understand all the parts that make up the whole, but just know that you're an influence to it and a nurturer and a carer. And really, I think a lot of the dilemmas that we've created has come from people wanting to control the outcome, greener crops, more fruit, more this, more that, chemical here, do this, more time on tractors and weeding and doing all these tasks that really become redundant when you start understanding that everything's working together and, in symbiosis and kind of value adding, 1 + 1 = 4. So. Yes,
exactly right. And to do that, we've got to get out of the way of what I think the system needs.
Yeah.
And the more I'm learning, the less lower tech the systems, the more productive and the more resilient they are. But they don't fit the economic model of an easy harvest or a very calculated and in sync process of having everything happen in that week. All of the fruit harvested that week or all of the planting done that week. Those are mechanized systems from an industrial mindset, which has consequences as we're learning.
Yeah. And it did take a little while for us to realize that. And one of the things I always talk about is that, everyone did the best they could with the information they had, and it blows my mind that we know more about the deep oceans and Mars and the moon than what we do on the soil beneath our feet. That's very easy. And I think it's just something that, a lot of people just went, oh, it's soil, it's dirt, just, put things in it and, let's, focus on other things. And now we've realized how much of life and well-being and food quality and everything is linked to the soil. And I know with your background, food nutrient density and the importance of food and even the flavor and the taste, what have you discovered with the work that you've been doing? And what are some of the stories that you've can share about how important food nutrient density and taste is?
That is such a big question. I'll do my best to be succinct.
That's okay.
What I've discovered is that if the system is left to self-organize and we've chosen appropriate plants for the appropriate location and we're providing them what they need, then the biology will manufacture the nutrition and the compounds necessary for that plant to express its genetics to the full of its capacity, or much more than it might otherwise. The consequence of that, of a plant that grows well, is flavour, aroma, and improved storage qualities, all of the things that we may take for granted with food that are actually not a given. The firmness of a fruit, the aroma of a tomato that meets me before I bring the tomato to my nose, that kind of just like an aura, the sensual enjoyment of food is intricately linked to the flavour of the food and the aroma of the food. And those compounds that create flavour and aroma are also linked to nutrition. That there's no separation from them. If there's a peach that doesn't smell like a peach, then if we were to analyse it, we'd understand that there's much less nutritional value and health promoting value of that aromaless peach than the one that's just like a party in my mouth. And we're so lucky in the West that we eat and we don't think of malnutrition as a problem. We certainly don't think of it as our primary concern of whether we eat well enough today. But Westernized society, my understanding is that we are grossly deficient in our nutritional profile, that most of us are actually deficient in trace minerals. Most of us lack the capacity to detoxify as well as the human body is designed to be able to do so because of those deficiencies. And consequently, we're actually having a difficult time managing with so many pollutants that we're coming into contact with because our bodies are actually becoming toxic and not able to detoxify. So what I've realised is there's a really delicious connection between the way the food was grown being that it was actually of benefit for the ecosystem, that it ensured good soil health, the soil's not eroding, the soil's filtering pollutants. It's a stable ecosystem that actually creates quite a beautiful landscape. And the food that's grown in those ways actually has more flavour, and those flavours are accompanied with more nutrition. So not only do I enjoy the food more because it tastes like it's supposed to, but it's actually more nutritious. And so I don't need to concern myself with so many health issues that so many other people are struggling with who have a less broad diet or are eating foods that are generally lacking nutrition. And unfortunately, most commercial foods, fresh foods and processed foods, are grossly deficient in the nutrient profile that we need to stay healthy. And so the connection is the way the food is grown correlates with flavour and aroma, and that correlates with how good I feel for eating it. And so there's this wonderful opportunity to discover true food and delicious food and to create culture around it, agriculture, but also celebrate food culture and look at maintaining good health rather than managing poor health.
I don't know about you, soul lovers, but that description made me feel really hungry. My mouth is watering because the way you just described that was just so well poetically put. And it's because it's so true. You know, it makes sense. It's so relevant. Like just that aroma of a peach, you're right. Like you don't get those smells anymore where you walk into a room and you can smell the fruit bowl sitting there because all the fruit is so ripe and delicious and your body's like almost craving it. And the fact that we are walking around the planet very nutrient deficient and always wondering why we're hungry and eating more and still feeling, you know, unsatisfied or not full, you know, makes you wonder that a lot of the research in these food companies and, you know, vitamin companies, are they really motivated to kind of solve that problem? Because that's kind of their profit lines, is keeping us a little bit, you know, malnutritioned, but with the illusion that we're eating a lot and that food security isn't a problem. So we're not focused on quality, we're just focused on quantity, you know. And coming from the marketing world, we all know that, you know, quantity sells and that's what keeps the profits in. But I see a shift where more and more people are speaking like exactly what you said, and there is hope. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in the field where people are turning more to nutrient density food, and how do they know that the food is more nutrient dense?
Well, the saying I like to perpetuate is to say that the nose knows, as in if it smells good, if it tastes good, then it probably is good. If it hasn't been hijacked by fats, salts and sugar, which fresh foods tend not to be, and processed foods are all the time, but fresh foods, there's kind of no hiding. And if that tomato doesn't taste stunning, then it probably isn't. And so the kind of things that I'm noticing with the clients that I work with is that everyone has an understanding that homegrown food tastes better because it's fresh. We have that, of course, fresh is best. We know that there are many studies that document that if you cut spinach or any other, vegetables, you put them in the fridge for a week, you bring them back out, there's a fraction of the vitamin C, there's a fraction of the other trace minerals, particularly the delicate enzymes and things that are most rich in a living plant and then just continue to decline. The vitality of the plant declines as it's being cut. Most home growers know that fresh is better, but not many home growers realise that their soil is not just a given. It's not just that soil and that's the plant. There are so many variables that can be influenced that can improve the flavour and the performance of the plants they're growing. And so what we see is a strong correlation between flavour and yield. And so if a crop is growing well, it tends to develop better flavour and aroma profiles as well. And that's partly due to management, and it's partly due to the seeds that it's been grown from. Many commercial hybrid seeds have undergone intensive breeding for qualities that the home grower doesn't value. Things like transportability, firmness, ability to be ripened artificially with ethylene gas, or all of these traits that, perhaps the tree will drop its fruit at the same time so that the harvesting period is smaller. The economics of doing so are more favourable for the farmer. There's many reasons that the breeding supports broadacre agriculture, but for a home grower, those qualities don't matter. When I don't want a whole tree of persimmons to be ripe at the same time, I'd actually prefer to just pick half a dozen every couple of days. And so if I've got a variety that tends to ripen that way, then it's going to support me much more. And many of the breeding operations that have been done have lost very important qualities like resilience, like capacity for the plant to perform well under stressed conditions, heavy rains, extreme storm events, drought periods, things like that. And it's a correlation between the soil and the genetics of the plant. The two are dramatically influencing of each other. But as home growers, I'm seeing people discover forgotten flavours and discover opportunities for variety that they're not able to buy in the shops. And we're just touching the sides of the potential of that, because heirloom seed varieties offer that kind of diversity, but most of them have not been adapted to local climates and conditions. Many of them are actually unreliable to use commercially, and that's for that reason we lean towards hybrids. But those varieties have a huge, immense opportunity if we breed them locally and adapt them locally and create a land race in the process. And so what I'm seeing is home gardeners on various points on the journey, from the person who's never grown anything before having a pot of basil and it's smelling better than the basil that they buy in a plastic tub in the supermarket, and that's enough to convert them to want to grow more herbs, to then the person who's been growing plants for 20 years, understanding that a soil test and adjusting the calcium levels in the soil and addressing some of the micronutrient deficiencies suddenly transforms the performance of their soil and the flavour of their vegetables as a consequence.
Amazing. And I think the one thing that really stood out to me is the fact that seeds are being produced in a way, and like you said, modified, I guess, or put in a way where, there's so many variables that have changed, like the firmness of it, the, being able to be transported for long times, ripen under gases. They're things that we don't want in our own backyard. We don't, necessarily, that's the opposite to what we want. And if, for all the fruit to fall within a smaller window, it is crazy that we have that type of engineering within the seed. So how do people get these better quality seeds? Is it something that they need to get from neighbors or heirlooming? And I've even heard that some seeds are designed not to reproduce because the companies want those seeds to kind of only have one life cycle. And then, if you grabbed a fruit from the market, the supermarket or whatever, and then you plant it, it's likely not to germinate because it's been, a one-hit wonder kind of programming.
Yes.
So where can people get better quality seeds? How does that start?
Well, it starts locally, because any seed that's been sourced locally will, if it's been grown locally, will have adapted to some extent to local conditions. So I can go online and buy a packet of tall Utah celery, for example, and you could go online and buy a packet of tall Utah celery, and we could have the same variety of celery, but it was grown in very different locations, and consequently it's had adaptation to many different environments. The genetics might be similar in those plants in that it can adapt and change, but there's been recent experiences. The memory gets stored in the plants. So every time a plant grows and sets seeds successfully, it remembers what it did to grow and set seeds successfully. And in doing so, it has a memory bank of capacities or strategies for succeeding in challenging conditions, whatever they were that year. And so if we're sourcing seed locally, we're already getting ahead of the game because we're getting seeds that are somewhat adapted. However, just because sourcing seed locally doesn't mean it's really well adapted to our immediate garden where we want to grow it or the soil type. So the best thing we can do is source our seed from local seed-saving communities, neighbours, or anyone else who's growing these seeds. Perhaps buy some heirloom seeds or organic seeds online or from companies that are reputable, and to mix those together to actually create this population that is resilient to that location. We start by selecting the survivors because obviously only the survivors survive. But in doing so, in saving the seed from the survivors, you've already selected for plants that had the capacity to thrive in that location. Many others may have died along the way. They may not have germinated. The seedlings may have become a victim to some sort of pathogenic fungi or some sort of pest or other issue. All of the variables get narrowed down to the successful candidates who survive and reproduce. And if we save seeds from them, we begin to select for the qualities that make those plants more successful in our location. And it gets really exciting when we start thinking beyond mere survival, because then we start selecting for traits that are more favourable. Like, I'd like a celery that has juicy leaves. I don't want one that's dry and fibrous. So if I have a low water regime and I don't have much water, if I save the best celery from my conditions every year, I'm gradually going to be favouring for expression of the qualities that are most favourable to me. And that could be anything: colour, broad size, early germination, early fruiting. Perhaps if I live in a cold climate, I want my tomatoes to ripen before winter so that I'm actually favouring for qualities that will help that plant do that. These are the opportunities that home growers and small-scale growers have available to them by selecting the seeds from local areas and then continuing to do that breeding work themselves.
So cool. That is amazing. And I love the fact that they're called seed banks, because it's like literally like you can go there and put a deposit of seeds in that have got quality and certain traits, and you can make withdrawals, and I think it's very important for soil lovers to find out where their local seed bank is, or feed, seed collectors. They tend to have like libraries and libraries of seeds stored well and in the right conditions, and waiting for someone. And I think some seed banks are kind of selective of who they allow the seeds to go to as well. So that way there's that quality control and it's not, there to be abused and so forth. But I think that, buying seeds from communities and local, and the fact that the seed is learning that local environment and the local, pest, and then the most resilient one kind of wins to some degree.
Yes.
Or its succession, natural selection. So it's really fun. And maybe someone's listening and thinking, I've been wanting to start a new business idea. Maybe that's something you can do, because I think the more people that are, banking seeds and working in the seed industry is a big space to be explored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really, really big. It's not just seed quality, it's seed freshness. I had an experience with carrots in Victoria. I bought several packets of carrot seed and never had any grow. And I was just, one of those gardeners disappointed, I can't grow carrots. Then I had one grow and it went to seed, and I had carrots growing like weeds after that. They just grew so easily. And I didn't realise just how dramatic seed freshness and seed quality could influence my experience. It was really big, and it was quite heartwarming, because I realised suddenly, for those of us who are struggling with certain varieties, it's most likely that we just don't have really amazing seeds to start with. So for anyone who's who's out there who's thinking about getting into seed saving or seed breeding, there is a really big demand for it, and it's only going to grow exponentially because we're seeing an uptake of food growing small scale and home like never before. And there's a real lack of quality available when we look at bulk seeds specifically, and because of the modifications that commerce has biased over the kind of breeding qualities that a home grower may have.
I love that. I'm going to explore that, what you just said then in regards to there is an uptake and an explosion of people being home growers. But before we do that, soil lovers, we're going to take a quick break because I need a bite to eat after all that delicious talk. So stick with us. Hey there, soil lovers. Did you know that there is now a digital agency that is committed and dedicated to soil caring businesses? Maybe it's you, or maybe you know someone who's really looking after our soils and they need to reach more customers. Well, finally, there is a marketing agency dedicated to soil caring businesses. They are soilconnect.com.au. In fact, it's one of my own businesses. I saw a need in the marketplace for a company that was good at marketing and digital, but also loved soil. Well, connecting those two interests together, I got Soil Connect. So head on over to the website and see what services we can help you with in order to amplify your soil caring activities. All right, enough from me. Back to the show. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Regen Ray and Ian Epic Earth from the Gourmet Garden School. We were getting hungry before the break, and you're talking about the fact that more and more people are turning to growing their own food, and there's been an explosion and an uptake of people taking that into their own domain and growing their own local food. Can you talk to that a little bit more, like why and what are you seeing people do that's amazing you?
Well, I think there was a big shift since COVID of people being at home and realising that food supplies were not as secure and as reliable as we're led to believe. And there's really strong evidence now to show that it doesn't take much in terms of a weather event or a global pandemic to get in the way of food being delivered as we hope and expect it would be. And so having some fresh food growing at home is a wonderful way to just insulate to some extent. I'm not talking about self-sufficiency. I'm just talking about having some fresh food available, because fresh food is one of the first things to go when the trucks stop moving. And so there's the convenience of having food at home. There's a degree of food security in it, but there's also some sovereignty in it. And when we talk about nutrition, it really is, the backyard becomes our pharmacy. It becomes our opportunity to maintain health through eating foods that taste great. So it's not a chore to stay healthy. Kids love vegetables if the vegetables are grown well. They don't taste rank. They actually taste really sweet and delicious.
Yeah.
In fact, kids will fight over, corn and peas and broccoli because they're so sweet and delicious. And that's how we can stay healthy. The supplement industry is a symptom of poor nutrition. Nobody had supplements hundreds of years ago. Perhaps, animal offal was the supplement. Perhaps, liver extract and things like that, heart. These are naturally mineral-dense organs of animals that maybe have been the only supplements. Other than that, we had food, and food was nutrition. And so when we consume foods that are truly nutrient-dense, they taste amazing, and it is a joy to be working with those kind of foods. And having fresh foods like that at home can inspire whole meals, like going out in the garden and go, oh my God, look at the fennel. It's huge. That fennel is just calling to be harvested today. And I have no idea what to do with fennel because I've never thought to buy one in the shop. But now that I've got one, I want to learn how to make something really delicious with it. And so it inspires this whole recipe that just fills us with so much joy. It fills me with joy, and everyone I know gets the same kind of thrill. I think it's just an innate human thing. And it brings us back to being in relationship to land as a human on the planet. And it transcends society and it transcends economics. And it actually just brings us back to basics of, well, humans, we live, we eat, we procreate, we die. It's a wonderful experience if it's done well.
Yeah, love that. And the whole, like, I see schools are starting community gardens and parents are saying, my kids are eating beans and I would never eat beans. But the fact that they were so involved in planting, watering, some schools even talk to their plants and give them names, that real connectivity. And then all of a sudden they're eating the beans and the corn and the broccoli and the Brussels sprouts, but they would never eat that at home. And I think that is a massive thing. One, because they're connected to it. And two, the taste is much more delicious because it's nurtured with care and the right intention.
Yes.
And so I love seeing schools that are activating community gardens or parents getting involved to start. Schools have so much unused land that could be activated into more better, productive learning spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just with your fennel talk, my favorite thing to do with fennel is a fennel and orange salad. It's a really interesting concept. Bit of salt, bit of oil, and you use the fennel leaves as a bit of garnish on top. And it's a really interesting flavor of fennel and orange coming together. So really nice.
Sliced or grated?
Sliced fennel and sliced. I've done it with mandarin and orange, and it's both great. So
wow, that's exciting. I haven't tried that.
I think I went to a restaurant once, and it's really good flavors.
I'm getting a vision. I'm getting a vision of nuts in there as well, some sort of nut component.
Yeah, pine nuts maybe, or toasted almonds. This episode's making us all hungry. It's full of delicious goodness. I love it. And so I think that's I got so sidetracked on a food thing here, but I think that's really important to really know that the people are. I think it took a really bad event like COVID to make people kind of realize, but having that access, and you're right, it's not about being self-sufficient. You're not going to probably grow enough food, but what I have seen is that most people have realized that they can make a big impact, whether it be like beating inflation, buying even 10% less at the shops helps, keep some money in your pocket, being able to share and build relationships and community with your neighbors and starting that kind of exchange economy where here's some carrots and, I baked some bread, here's half a loaf of bread, and, starting those conversations. And I grew up in that kind of culture with the Italian background. My grandparents' backyard was basically permaculture, retro suburbia, but I didn't know it back then. And that's kind of, a lot of people came and visited the backyard because they were picking up produce and eggs and trading things and picking plums from the trees because it was too much for us to consume ourselves. So it does really bring people together. I think food's always being something that brings communities together, exchanging stories and having a feast around a campfire is a little bit like primal, it takes us back to, those primal, cave person days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we take food out, it's actually kind of absent. Life feels a little absent. It's the most amazing cultures around the world all have wonderful food. We all associate the best cultures with the food. And it's an important part of life. And it's a really unfortunate thing that last century's mechanization of agriculture and abundance of cheap food gave us this convenience to step away from being involved with the preparation and preservation of food. And in doing so, gave us the space to allow poor quality, low flavor. I mean, if I look in the shop at pickles and chutneys, I am so devastated at that there is zero brands or products I would like to buy from the shop. There's not one. All of them are loaded up with things that I don't want in them, sugar, thickening agents. None of them have the punchy flavor of any kind of homemade chutney. We've lost the expectation of flavor and quality being the prerequisite with food. They're a bonus for people who are used to buying food. And there's been a loss in the convenience culture of quality. And it's a really delicious opportunity for us to rediscover that, either through growing our own or through being affiliated with people who are and sharing that, because it's abundant. Food creates culture because there's so much abundance that has to be shared.
Yes, I think more time is something that people have discovered over post-COVID. People were working from home. They didn't have to do the transporting to and back. They went down to 3 days a week, and having that more time opened up this space to go, well, now I can spend some time in the garden, or I can make sourdough bread, or I can brew some kombucha tea, all those fun things. And I was guilty of all of those during COVID as well, when I was bored and locked up in my apartment and, trying to put permaculture principles into practice in an apartment, just to prove that you don't need land. You can live a permaculture life in a small space. And I understand that you've gotten out in the garden and you're spending some time really connected to nature. You've been, sleeping in the backyard overnight and discovering your connectivity to that. Can you share a little bit about why you decided to sleep in the yard and what you're learning from this? Process?
Yes, it wasn't an intentional thing to begin with. I mean, I love being outside. I love the fresh air and I love camping and things. And I'm so delighted by being in the garden that this year I've decided to spend much more time in the garden, to make work less of a priority and give myself the time to really be implementing what I know as best practice and proving it for myself and learning it for myself. And that involves spending more time and sitting around the campfire. I mean, I've got swag. I love sleeping out around a campfire. I built a fireplace in the garden last year, and my wife and I have been sitting out cooking all sorts of meals on the fire. And it's just inspired me to spend some nights out there and enjoy the garden from the dawn till the dusk and through the night. I mean, I don't go out in the heavy rain. Don't get me wrong. I'm not that keen. But and it actually has been raining heavily the last few days and I've not been in the garden. But when the weather is a little fairer, I'm out there and I find it so nourishing. It's nourishing on a soul level. I can't adequately describe why I find it so nourishing, but I just find being out there such an enjoyable experience. And it's teaching me a lot. It's actually teaching me a lot more than I expected, and observing the plants through the day, observing the performance of different plants based on where they are or different varieties that I'm growing. It's like the more time I'm out there, the more I'm observing and I'm learning. And there's a lot to be gained from just spending 5 minutes a day in the garden. But compared to spending several hours a day or all day in the garden, there's a huge amount that can be learned. And for me, a huge amount to enjoy. I really that's my home. That's my paradise. If I was to design the Garden of Eden, it would be a garden and it would be full of food. And that would be my heaven.
Love that. That is so great. And the fact that you're like spending time, you really put in, your mouth where your food is, type of thing. And you're walking the walk and really, kind of getting out there and sharing it and creating these courses and content that's really just kind of, moving the narrative more and more forward and coming on and doing podcasts like this. Ian, we could talk for hours and hours, but we need to get to our signature question. Are you ready to become the voice of the soil?
Sure.
Excellent. Excellent.
I hadn't rehearsed this, so I'm just going to go off the cuff.
Excellent. Let me just script it properly. This is the only part that is scripted. So, Ian, you have become the soil. You've embodied its energy and you've become its mouthpiece. What would you say to the 8 billion people that are on Earth today as the soil?
Your health is directly linked to your digestive health. By tending me, the soil, you tend your own digestive health. And consequently, the ecosystem is healthier. Your life is more enjoyable.
Love that. Love that. That saying, you are what you eat, is very, very true. And taking that one step further, you are what you eat 8. So if your plant is eating bad soil or bad microbes or bad nutrition, then you're eating bad quality as well. So I love that kind of link. And to the gut biome, I think massive amounts of research and links are becoming more and more known that the quality of the food that we eat is directly linked to our gut biome and the soil biome, and then to our mental health and stability of a nation. I think it's really, really groundbreaking, pun intended. Some of that research is coming out. Dr. Zach Bush plays a big part on some of that research, setting up a lab basically dedicated to studying, the soils in the Amazon rainforest that have never been touched, and true biology and microorganisms, and doing research around that. And I agree, your voice of the soil, linking that gut health to the soil health is a really big component of it.
And that's actually, it's so big, I'm realizing, the relocalizing of resources and consuming more food from where I live. I'm consuming more microbial cultures from the area that I'm living in, through touching the soil, nibbling plants, cooked meals, breathing the air. The more I'm present to that, the more relocalized I'm becoming. And it actually creates this coherence that I'm experiencing through greater mental clarity and greater intuitive understanding of what I can do to work with the system to benefit the outcome without meddling.
Love that. Well, you're touching it, eating it, and sleeping in it, Ian. It's been so great chatting with you and exploring, more of this soil stuff with our soil lovers. How can soil lovers hang out with you more?
Yes, so you can find me at the gourmetgarden.school. The extension is .school, not .com, because I'm a school. And I'll have a YouTube channel, the Gourmet Garden School, and Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. And I'm I am doing a lot, and I'm going to be doing a lot more. I've got a real drive to share the skills and techniques to help people grow better quality food, and to do so as generously as I can.
Awesome. Well, keep up the great work. And I definitely will hang out with you very often on your YouTube channel. Love the content, and love how you've helped some of the people in my network. And now the soil lovers can also discover the wonderful world of soil with you, another soil lover. And are you going to listen to your episode when it comes out live?
I reckon I'll have a go.
Excellent. Give us a download. So that's great. Some people cringe at it. They're like, oh, I don't want to hear myself. Well, I have to listen to every episode, so I'm constantly listening to myself. So there you go. Thanks, Ian, for coming along and having fun with us talking about soil. I'll let you get back out into the garden, because I know you're probably itching to get back out there and possibly sleep the night in there if the rain clears. So thanks a lot for hanging out with the soil lovers.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate it. Thanks, soil lovers.
Excellent. Well, there you go, soil lovers. That's another episode for you to sink your teeth in. Hopefully this episode made you hungry, not just for food, but for more about soil and the world beneath our feet. So make sure you share this episode with all your friends, family, and anyone you can convince to have a soil conversation with. Until next time, make sure that you get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into the wonderful world of soil. I'm Regen Ray. I'll catch you on the next show. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around, and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.